I truly believe we live in a world that's not present. We are constantly running from one thing to the next. We're constantly looking at our phones. I have to be here, there, everywhere. And it's easy to get wrapped up into that when you have a family and you're trying to build a business.
Brant, I am pumped to have you here today. I feel like I've known you for a long time. One of the things that really struck me from our conversations, reading your book, was the importance of connections, relationships. No surprise, but specifically the importance of friendship. Tell me why you think that is important if we tie it straight into business. If you're an advisor, a planner watching this, which is you probably will be, why is that important in your business?
Oh, friendship is critical. Our friends are the first people that we go to ask about our dreams and our ideas. It's the first group that I guess I'll say we battle test those ideas with to see if we're ready for the big time. I've gone through some situations in my life losing a couple of very close friends. I lost one of my very best friends to ALS in 2018. And to see the way that our friend group rallied around him and his family was nothing short of amazing. ALS is an absolute horrible thing to go through. And it just really made me think if he hadn't taken the time to really nurture his friendships and to keep those friendships going, I think that process would have been a whole lot more difficult for them. And I also run into scenarios working with clients or talking with people that are maybe in their 50s and their kids have gone away to college and they don't really have a network of friends. And they've spent so much time developing career and being with their kids and doing all these things that are critically important that friendships fell on the side of the road for them. And it's a little bit depressing for me to think that here you are in this really exciting chapter where you get to do some new things that you haven't been able to do when you're building your companies and starting a family. And if you don't have friends to share some of those highs and lows with, I think that's depressing. So, anyway, I have some things that are very important in my life, and friends happen to be just one of them, but a very important one.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It's an amazing, tragic experience to go through. But tell us a little bit about your business. And first of all, the name of how it came to be is very interesting as well. But what was the driving force around why you started and what you started at? And tie that into perhaps like some advisors that maybe earlier on in their journey, if you would.
Yeah, so how about I go way back to age 5? Some people, well, maybe they start right in the middle of their career, but I'll go way back for you. But now, as a typical 12-year-old, I always wanted a red Honda three-wheeler for Christmas. Three-wheelers like an ATV, it's the really dangerous ones. I'm in my mid 40s and I don't even think they make them anymore. So it's probably about the most dangerous Christmas present you can ask for. But I asked my parents for one every single year. I always came out of my room, turn the corner, look at the Christmas tree, hoping that the three wheeler would be there with a big bow on it. And despite never getting the three wheeler, one day I did have an envelope in front of the tree. And so I opened the envelope, curious what it would be. Clearly not a toy, clearly not the present that I had hoped for. And it was a single share of Disney stock. So my parents had the wherewithal to give me a present at an early age, which I really didn't understand. A certificate with the picture of Walt Disney at the time wasn't particularly thrilling, but it did start to pique my interest in the stock market at a young age. From that point on, I had all the typical jobs that you could have as a teen, starting with corn detasseling. Have you ever heard of corn detasseling, Nick? It's a dreadful job. I'm from Kalamazoo, Michigan in the Midwest, and it's a job you get up at 6 in the morning. It's cold, it's wet, and you walk through the cornfields and pick the tassels off the top of the corn. I'm still to this day not exactly sure why. I think it has something how the corn grows, but I know you work a lot of hours for a very little amount of money. And so I started my career in corn detasseling. I went on to do a bunch of other physical labor jobs as we do it as kids, figuring out the things that I didn't want to do in life. And then I gravitated back towards this finance thing. And the stock market is interesting, it's changing every day. It looks exciting on TV, especially you'd see the pictures of the New York Stock Exchange floor and the tickets flying around. And I thought maybe this would be a cool career to get started in. So I started my career typical financial advisor working for a nationwide broker dealer. I did that starting in my 20s. I did have the opportunity to move out to New York City when I was 21 years old, which was a really cool experience working in the city. I had an opportunity to work on the New York Stock Exchange floor, this thing that I'd seen on TV when I was a kid. I had the opportunity to actually go there and experience it a little bit. And then at some point in my career, I didn't love the corporate model. I didn't love the commission based model. I think it was around 08, 09, Nick, when we went through the Great Recession. And you would be waking up any given morning and hear about the next firm that was failing. And so I thought, I don't really want to wake up and hear that the company that, I'm working at and I have all these great clients at is all of a sudden going to go out of business and I have nothing to do with it. And I like the idea of having equity in something. So I went independent in 2009. This is a unique time to make a transition. The market crashes in 2008. The market bottoms out in 2009. And then, of course, I decide it's a good time in June of 2009 to go work for a company that none of my clients have ever heard of. It wasn't a big deal to me to have my name on the company door. And I was looking around at different independent companies to join. And unfortunately, the company that I had worked for got word that I was going to be leaving. And so I got called into the branch manager's office. And essentially, to make a long story short, he said, "Hey, we got word that you're going to be leaving in a few months. And because of that, we're going to have to let you go today." So this was on a Friday morning. I believe it was June 24th or June 25th. As I said, the market had just bottomed out 3 months before. My daughter was born in January of '09, so I had a 5-month-old daughter at home. And I'm driving away from the office. I call my wife, who's probably still trying to figure out how to nurse at the time. And just to say, "Hey, honey, I got fired today, but don't worry, we're going to figure this out. We're going to find a place to go." I hadn't made a final decision on company. I didn't have an office. I didn't have business cards. I didn't have a website. And I knew on Monday morning there was going to be a team coming in from another city to call all of my clients. And so right away, I had to get on the phone that afternoon and call all my clients before I knew someone else was going to call them on Mondays. So my company name, the RIA that I own now, is called 626 Financial. And the reason it's called 626 Financial is because 626 of '09 was the day that we started the company. And so that was a day that I had always dreamed of, even though my dream didn't include starting 3 months early and getting fired. But I thought this is a day that's really important to me. It's a cool day on my journey. And so we named the company 626 Financial. And so I went independent, speed things up on background a little bit. I eventually got interested in investing in commercial real estate. So I started doing some commercial real estate deals on the side. I just thought, if I'm holding myself out there as a well rounded advisor, and I have a fiduciary responsibility to put my clients' interests first, how can I possibly give great advice when I don't know a whole lot about a really important asset class that's out there? And so I just thought I need to learn as much as I can about some other areas. I started investing in commercial real estate, which led to me starting and managing commercial real estate funds. Somewhere along the way, I also got interested in venture capital. And with a couple of partners, started some venture capital funds and investing in early stage startups. And then last year went on a cool journey. I hadn't read a book in 15 or 20 years. It reminded me of traditional academia, which for a big dreamer like me, traditional academia never really jived with what I like to do. And I was encouraged by some other entrepreneurs to take some of the things that I had learned to put it in a book. And out of nowhere, I became a best-selling author last year, which was a really cool experience. And then have also gone on to found a foundation. So a whole lot of different hats. My journey's gone in a lot of different directions. But yeah, that gives you a general idea of where I've been over the last 35 or so years.
Whistle stop tour. Thank you so much, Brian. There's so many cool things there. The first thing that really jumps out for me, and how frequent this is as well, that your start came from a place where it seemingly was a bad time to do something, right? And then you got the extra double whammy of getting found out, as it were, and then getting fired. But I find so many great stories start with that type of thing. Obviously, we can laugh about it now, but I'm sure at the time it was really a challenge for sure. But it also, I imagine, it got you up to that place where you stepped up even further to do it. For me, I like the analogy of doing a barbell squat, if you warm up doing barbell squats, you put the bar on your back, and without any weight on the bar, it's a little bit harder to actually do the squat there because it's not very stable. As soon as you put some weight on, you get more stability. It's actually easier to push. And I find that sometimes is often the case as well. What might you say to kind of someone starting out in that place, thinking about going independent, away from in-house something, or just starting out, like in those moments, what's the prevailing mindset that's really important to keep pushing through?
Yeah, the prevailing mindset is have faith that the next chapter is going to be a great chapter. My mindset was, hey, I didn't expect it to happen like this, but this is a thing that I've always dreamed of, and now it's here. This is my opportunity to really take advantage of this thing that I've always wanted to do. And I could have curled up in a ball and I could have cried and I could have not called my clients and I could have done all kinds of things, but I really took it on as a challenge to see how well I could do during what many would think is a really difficult time. And we all hear the phrases, you learn more in failure than you do in success. And I really do believe that's true. I really have come to appreciate the difficult times more than I appreciate the successful times because I know there's going to be a lesson in there somewhere. I don't always know what the lesson's going to be. It might not come for a month or 6 months or a year, but I know that I'm going to learn more about myself during really trying times than I'm ever going to learn when everything's just going great. So my mindset was this is exciting, it's an opportunity, and I'm going to make the best of it. And that's what I did.
It's beautiful. And that resilience, I think that keep on going no matter what is such a theme that I see for people that are successful, however you want to put that in order. But give us an idea of where your practice is now, however you want to share that, just for context so everyone can see where you've grown in those different areas. I think it's so cool that you've got that rounded version of how you've expanded it.
Yeah, so I go back to how I started it. Starting in 2002, 2003, I did have a great mentor, and my dad was in the insurance business from the late 70s on. As I mentioned before, my parents were very influential in terms of giving me my start in thinking about the stock market. So when I originally got into this business, my dad was the manager of a very large department at a nationwide broker dealer, and it happened to be the insurance and annuity department. And so, really, when I was starting out, I thought I was just going to travel around the country and help advisors for this one specific company do more insurance and annuity business. And so I thought this will be cool. In my early 20s, I'll get to travel around the country. This will be a lot of fun. And about 6 months into it, the department, my dad was operating out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. He was the only department head that wasn't in New York City. And about 6 months into it, he got an ultimatum essentially to either move the department to New York or no longer run the department. So within the first 6 months of starting this new exciting career, I was really at a crossroads of, is this a business that I stay in and try to do something different with, or do I just go live somewhere else? I never intended to be in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where I grew up. I moved back in my mid 20s because I had a grandfather that was sick with congestive heart failure. So I really only planned to come back for a few months. Ended up meeting a girl, getting married. Kalamazoo is a great place to raise kids, but I really didn't expect to build a business here. That was never in my plans. So this thing happens with the department, and immediately I have to decide, do I want to build a book of business? And so there was no real business there. Yeah, I want to try to do that. I think that would be a heck of a challenge. How do we do that? I heard that seminars work. Why don't we try seminars? Why don't we send out 5,000 invitations to a bunch of people in these various zip codes that might have money to invest? We'll take them all to dinner. Maybe you get 20 to 40 people that show up. You buy everybody dinner. Maybe you get 2 or 3 appointments out of that. And inevitably, they're always 7 at night or 7 in the morning. And then maybe you pick up a client or two. That's really how I built my business. It was not easy. We talked about different investing concepts and probably did, I don't know, 15 to 20 seminars a year from 2002 to 2007. They always say your first 20 million is your hardest to get. And so I always had that number in the back of my mind, if I can just get to 20 million. And so that's how I built the business. And fast forward to today, we have an RIA that's approaching 400 million under management. I have a partner, we're both in our 40s and own various companies that I talked about. But that's really how I got started, was old fashioned, do the seminars, take anyone you can get because you had to make a living.
Oh, super cool, Brant, to hear that with the seminars. 15 to 20 a year. And perhaps it's a side thing. Sometimes now I often hear, oh, I'm going to try and do one a quarter. And maybe it's not the whole business, but what translate that to these days? Like what would that look like for you if you were starting out now, or if you're in the business now, relatively true, still trying to get to that first 20 million, or indeed just not as established as you are now? What would be your approach to, in that same way, like to do that initial build?
It's interesting. I don't know if the seminar game is still working. I think my approach, if I were starting off in the business today, is to find a really solid senior team that needs a good junior partner to come in and help take some responsibility off their plate. I think there's a lot of baby boomers and the baby boomer generation that's getting closer and closer to maybe their next chapter in the near future. And I think a lot of people, because I know I've fallen into this trap myself, you just get in a rhythm of doing the same things you've always done. And, oh, I'll get to adding somebody at some point, and I'm sure I'll find a kid, and I'm sure this will all kind of work out and come together. But I think if you can cut your teeth at a bigger corporation, go through some training, read some books, learn a little bit about the financial services industry, learn a little bit about financial planning, learn a little bit about maybe real estate and venture capital that maybe a traditional financial advisor doesn't spend as much time on. You can go in and talk about how you might be able to add value and take some responsibilities off their plate. You do a good job, and then maybe you get an opportunity to work into their book and eventually be the successor at some point down the road. The seminar business is a really tough way to do it. Think about it. You're in your 20s. You're just starting out. How many people want to trust a brand new advisor with any of their money, let alone say $1 million account? And then if you're lucky enough to maybe get 1% or $10,000, that's cut up over 12 months, and then you get taxed on it and then all the things, and all of a sudden $1 million account doesn't sound as glamorous as you might think it did starting out. So I think working into an established team is really the way to go.
That's awesome. I love that. And to your point, there's so much out there, so much opportunity and I have a lot of clients that are in that spot where they're trying to get that junior person in to come and help work the book and work together in producer groups, because it's clear that coming together in a team, whatever way you can do that, is going to be beneficial for everyone. So that's super cool to hear from that point of view. Give me a view from the middle of the road. Where along your journey have you found to be most challenging? Like, was there a certain ceiling that you hit that you stuck out for a while? You did mention it's easy to get in a rhythm and do that thing without pushing yourself to the next place. So that's interesting for me to hear as well. But what might have been a challenge along the way in terms of hitting a ceiling that was challenging to get through for you?
The biggest challenge is doing something you've never done. And as it relates to asset gathering and, traditional stock and bond business, as I was doing the seminars, what I would always hear in my early 20s, and especially from established advisors, was all of my referrals come from my network. I've got this network and that network, and you just got to do networking. And I'm like, what's networking? I don't have a network. I have friends. Does that count? But it's okay. Everyone's saying networking. And so I started to focus on how can I become better at that? And so establishing relationships with other successful people that were my age is something that I did early on because I was hoping at some point I wouldn't have to do seminars forever. And maybe, just maybe at some point, I could get tied in with a good group of successful younger people that would eventually help carry the business later. And so I was fortunate being exactly 2 hours from Detroit and 2 hours from Chicago. And a lot of my friends in their 20s moved to Chicago. They graduate college, there's a lot to do. It's a heck of a lot more fun. I'll argue Kalamazoo, Michigan when you're 25. And so I was really fortunate to get tied in with a group of guys in Chicago that worked for a large technology resale company. And at one point in time, they were forced to be captive in Chicago, even though they had territories all across the United States. And then at some point, the company allowed them to move back to their hometowns and move back to their territories. So I was doing this networking on the side. And then when this group spread across the United States, that's really where the business grew quite a bit. And I would say a lot of that happened in my 30s. But that part took care of itself in a way. But going back to your question, what was the difficult thing, for example, is starting a real estate fund? I got to a point where I was very proficient with stocks and bonds and financial planning and doing the X's and O's of the stock market. But if I had somebody come into the office that said, I own a large multifamily real estate portfolio, I'm trying to decide if, this is a good real estate deal. I'm trying to figure out the pros and cons versus this and investing in Apple and Microsoft and Stryker. I have some venture capital opportunities. Mr. Financial Advisor, which one of these things is in my best interest? And so that's where my partner and I decided we've got to test out some concepts. We don't really know exactly what we're doing in these areas, but if we don't test them out with our own capital and see what it's all about, how in the heck are we ever going to be able to advise people on it? So, what was really a difficult leap for me, because when you're singularly focused on traditional stocks and bonds, really the most that you know about those other asset classes is how to sell against them. Oh, you don't want to do real estate. That's not liquid. You're going to have to, what if you don't have a tenant? Then you're still going to have to pay to turn the lights on. And this stock, you can sell it any time during the day. You're never locked in. So you get good at selling against things, but do you really know all the pros and cons of something that you haven't done yourself and you haven't studied? And so taking the time to go out and to learn about something that I wasn't proficient in, getting to know about it, learning about it, taking the risk to invest my own capital in it, going through successes, going through challenging times and doing that, and then having an opportunity to say, okay, I think we're ready to now start our own fund so we can give our clients an opportunity to invest in something that we've done ourselves, battle tested ourselves, and we can intelligently talk about now. So that to me is the most challenging thing, is to get out of the thing you're really good at and to gravitate towards the things that you haven't even come close to mastering.
That's beautiful. Because again, it's the same, get out of your own way, get out of your own mindset, challenge the next level. And specifically, I love what you said there is just get away from what you're really good at. It seems so counterintuitive. But in order to get to great, you've got to say goodbye to good, or at least be prepared to. And so to push yourself to that place, experience it, go through it, then you really are in a place where you can talk to your clients and prospects about that. I think another great mindset shift, right? In order to grow, you've really got to be out of that and be uncomfortable. It's so trite to say that these days, right? About getting out of your comfort zone, but that's really what it looks like.
I like to think of it as trying to master your weaknesses. Yeah, it's cool to be good at one thing. And I think that's great to be able to hang your hat on that. You can get to the top 5% or 1% in your field, whatever it may be. But how do you rank yourself on all the other things? If you're already in the top 5% of one category, doesn't it maybe make sense to think about some of the things you're not good at? You know, we can all stand up, use a baseball analogy. We can all stand up and hit a ball off a tee, but how about trying to master hitting the curveballs? And those are the things that are really interesting to me. They're the hardest things to do, but gravitating towards the things that you know the least about or you're not great at, I think is a really noble thing to do. And it gives you more depth, it gives you more perspective, it makes you a more complete person and a more complete advisor. And that's what's always been interesting to me.
Yeah, that's powerful. To give yourself a different level of depth and perspective when you're in those conversations, you can talk about those things with that conviction and authority to get to that next place. You mentioned network and referrals before as well. I got to ask you a bit more about referrals because it's a subject all of my clients talk about. Always, it's always something that pops up, and people have varying levels of success or as to what they think that is. What would you say most advisors get wrong when it comes to referrals or introductions or favorable introductions, as I like to call them?
I think pushing too hard for it. There's a lot of different approaches on referrals. When I was coming up in the business, it was like promote referrals all the time, wear the name of the company on your hat, always be promoting yourself, always let people know that you're taking new clients. And I think there is some truth to that, but what's worked a heck of a lot better to me is just be a genuine person. Take care of your clients, listen to your clients, be honest with them, be honest with yourself. If you make a mistake, own up to it. I think Warren Buffett just said something recently. If you make a mistake, don't be a thumb sucker. Own up to it, say what you did wrong, and move forward in a productive way. And I think the other thing that's worked really well is really, truly always giving advice that is in the best interest of the client. I've lost track of the amount of times that I have recommended that a client do something that benefits me 0%. And I could have easily swayed them to do something different that was going to be more in my benefit. For example, a new client that just came on a couple weeks ago, I talked with a couple years ago, and they had call it $700,000 that they could have invested, but they were also looking to potentially buy some Little Caesars franchises and potentially buy the real estate and maybe do that in an 18-month period. And after talking through their situation and looking at the estate plan and the insurance and things that were more critical than investing, and to be fully prepared for a business opportunity that might come their way, I told them right now probably isn't the best time to invest with me. I think you'd be better served to circle back to me in a couple years. Let's keep in touch. And that would have been something that would have been very easy to bring that, call it 700,000 in, make $7,000 a year, maybe make 7,000 the next year. But by giving advice that I really felt my heart was best for them, they did come back a couple years later. They recently came on board. And I think when you lead with that mindset, you're going to have more that comes back to you than you ever imagined. And for me, with the referrals, it's just doing the right thing every single day, improving myself as much as I possibly can, trying to give new, fresh ideas, and the rest takes care of itself. It's just the way that comes natural to me, Nick. I know there's a lot of different ways to do it. Those other ways just don't feel natural to me. And so I've just always tried to do it by being a good person and making the right decisions for people.
I've found, Brant, that there's a separator and a nuance in this high level mindset. And so I'd love your thoughts on this if you see this as well. But there's people that get that you have to focus on what you can control, your actions that impact the results. And that's the starting point. And then the elevation to that is what you just demonstrated, a way of disassociating actions and results. It's like a Buddhist saying, I believe all suffering comes from attachment to the outcome. And that if you provide value, somewhere down the line, it's going to come back to you as well. But the distinction I make here for people that are really high level, that I have the privilege to spend some time with and work with, is the distinction you made where you're able to really disassociate those two. And so it's just about giving, giving, giving. I have one client I just want to love on clients. I just want to love them. And that's essentially what you just said. I'm just going to do whatever I see the most value to that person in that moment, and everything else will be fine. But it's you've just taken that and are able to really draw the distinction, because it's easy to get caught up in that. First of all, if it's not even the point where they're focusing on what they can control to get the results. Like, it's easy to get caught up in, if I do that thing that's in my control, then I'll get a result from it. But like that disassociation, I think that's the elevated mindset that I see from people operating at that level. I think that's a
Yeah. And how does it work? It's not always a financial decision. At the beginning of your career, of course, you've got to pay the bills, and maybe you have to take on clients that aren't a perfect fit and that you maybe aren't a perfect reflection of yourself. But you do get to a point as you move forward where it becomes a lot more about just economics. And so, for an example, we were in Chicago and doing an event at the University of Chicago, and met a really interesting husband and wife that have a very large net worth that lived in Florida, and got to talking throughout the conference. And one of their questions came up: if we wanted to work with you, what would it take? What would it take in terms of finances? What would it take in terms of account size? And my response to them, the first thing I'd want to do is fly down and have you meet my wife. Because if I'm going to take on this big of a client that lives in Florida, that's going to be taking time away from my family, I've got to make sure that she's on board with that. And so I think that just struck them, was my immediate answer and my honest answer. But I think that just struck them as odd, but they were like, I really respect and appreciate that. And yeah, being genuine and speaking from the heart is what's worked best for me, Nick.
that is so cool. For me, that's exactly what the seven figure is about. It's doing things in the way that is best for your business, but also best for your most important relationships, that allows you to continue to move forward in a sustainable way. Yeah, and I can imagine how that prospect was blown away by that. That's so cool. On that note, as we come to a close here, Brand, I think there's so many things that you could share here. It's super valuable. Maybe we'll come back for a round two at some other point if that sounds good to you. But out of all the things that you shared today, what would you point the audience to as to one thing that they should really take away from all the things that you've shared today?
I truly believe we live in a world that's not present. We are constantly running from one thing to the next. We're constantly looking at our phones. I have to be here, there, everywhere. And it's easy to get wrapped up into that when you have a family and you're trying to build a business. And I think it's really easy to get away from the basic building blocks of having some balance in your life. And it's interesting when you ask a crowd of people, okay, you're a successful entrepreneur on the outside looking in, you're making this money, things are going well. How happy are you? How fulfilled are you? And it's really shocking that probably the average answer you're going to get is, if people are being honest, is maybe a 6 out of 10. So why is that? Why are people successful, maybe more successful than they've ever been, but so unhappy? And I think if you really dig into it and you spend some time thinking about it, I think there's probably some values that you have, some things that are very important in your life. We started the conversation talking about friends, but there's other things. There's family, there's physical fitness, there's mental well being. For a lot of people, there's faith, and there's career. But I think a lot of people, there's a knot in their stomach because they're doing one thing really well while completely neglecting all these other really important areas of their life. And so I really took some time to think about that and went on this journey a few years ago and thought about how can I turn my values, those things that are most important, into my daily habits. I know I'm doing the career thing pretty well. There's a lot of people out there that do it better than me, but I'm pretty proficient there. How good of a friend am I being? How good of a dad, a son am I being? How much am I focusing on my physical fitness? How much reading and personal development am I doing? What I found, Nick, is by intentionally thinking about that, and that's the first step. A lot of people, you don't take the time to think. If you don't have time to think, how is a good idea ever going to pop into your head? You're going to continue to do what you've always done. So if you're just running from one thing to the next and you never lose yourself in thought, then new ideas aren't going to come to you. And you're certainly not going to be thinking about balance. So what I found is that by really intentionally checking those boxes to a point where I feel like I'm doing at least an 8 out of 10 in each, I've never been more present in the things that I'm doing. So when I'm with friends, I'm 100% with friends. I'm not worried about work. I'm not worried about running or lifting or doing the things that I've already done. I'm fully present with them. And I find that by consistently checking all those boxes of the things that are most important to me, it keeps me at a happiness level that's very high, which ironically leads to the highest level of success. And I know that you touch on that with your business model, the bit that I know about it, and being well-rounded. And I just think that is absolutely critical. And that was really the purpose behind writing the book. It's my how-to guide on not only having success in business, but having success in life, which ironically is the most important thing.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much, sir. Yeah, so for everyone watching, listening here, go check out Brant's book. Stop hitting the snooze button. Awesome. Pleasure. Appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on.